Oh God, you really have to call to wake me up at 12:06 just because there's another mystery, said Betty, a female detective, as she yelled at Jack, a male detective. Here goes the lecture again, murmured Jack, but Betty didn't hear him and went on with her lecture. The next day, Betty and Jack went to a nearby park to investigate. The breeze was as light as a feather. Since it was hot, they both decided to get some lemonade. Luckily, there was a lemonade stand nearby. Jake gave Betty some money and went to sit on a bench nearby. As she got closer, Betty noticed that the man selling the lemonade matched the robber's partner's description. She looked at his hand. He was wearing a turquoise sweatband. Are you in line? A voice boomed behind her. Betty turned around to see a short, thin, red-haired little man. Betty almost thought the boy was the robber. Then she remembered that both the robbers had a turquoise sweatband. No, said Betty. Then the boy moved in front of her. The boy looked familiar. Then she remembered he was Dennis, the mailboy. Her thoughts were interrupted by a loud voice saying, Hi, Dennis, what do you want today? Lemonade or ice cream? Dennis screamed back, Ice cream, please, and ran towards the stand serving ice cream. Betty, who decided to follow Dennis, ran towards the ice cream stand too. What flavor do you want, Dennis? Asked the ice cream man. Chocolate swirl with a cherry on top and sprinkles on a waffle cone, please, said Dennis, licking his lips. When it was Betty's turn to choose a flavor, she noticed that the man selling ice cream matched the description of the short and stout robber. He also had a sweatband like the robber selling lemonade. The sweatband was turquoise too. Well, miss, are you gonna buy some ice cream? If you are, pick your flavor fast. There are a lot of people waiting in line to buy ice cream like you, said the short robber. I'll have chocolate fudge sundae with a cherry on top, said Betty quickly. Here you go, miss. I hope you enjoy it, said the robber. Thank you, said Betty. She turned to Jack. Betty whispered to Jake, Jake, I found the robbers. They're in disguise as a lemonade and ice cream man. Their stands are over there. She pointed in the direction of the stands. Great job, Betty. Now that we know where both the robbers are, I have a plan, Jake whispered. He shared the plan with Betty, and they both agreed to follow the plan. 1 hour later, when Betty was done with her lecture, they were at Mrs. Lucas's house because she had lost her gold necklace. Mrs. Lucas said it had been passed down from her great-grandma's grandma. Betty asked if she caught a glimpse of the robber. Mrs. Lucas said the robber was short and stout. He had red hair and black eyes. Though it was dark, I can see that the robber was limping. His partner was tall and lean. The partner was bald and his eyes were green. Both wore a turquoise sweatband. Thank you for telling me this, Mrs. Lucas. I will report this to the police. If they ever catch them, they can take them to jail, said Jack. You guys are a great help, said Mrs. Lucas with a sigh. You are welcome, and bye for now, said Betty. That night, they followed the robbers to their den. It was 8 o'clock when the robbers reached their den. The robbers' den was an abandoned farmhouse. Betty and Jack slipped inside the robbers' den and hid in a closet nearby. It was really dusty and smelly in there. The detectives overheard the robber talking about their day. One said that he had earned $36. The other said that he had earned $21. Suddenly, Betty sneezed loudly. A voice then boomed, Who is here? Show yourself quickly. But Betty and Jack didn't move out of their hiding places, nor did they say anything. The noise must have come from somebody outside, or the wind, Bria, said one of the robbers. Maybe then, said the other robber. A few minutes later, the robbers ate their dinner. Poor Betty and Jack. They only had a brownie, a cookie, and a soda each, which they had bought that morning. That night, Betty and Jack memorized the route from the park to the robbers' den and went home. The next morning, the detective set off to the robbers' park. That next morning, the detectives set off to the park. As soon as the robbers arrived at the park, Betty and Jack set off for the robbers' den. Jake opened the locked door with the pin. "Where do you think we should look first?" asked Jake. "The living room and then the garden," answered Betty. In the living room, they had only found newspaper clippings. In the garden, they saw 4 holes. The first hole had a cup of cigarettes. The second hole had a picture of a dog. The third hole had a flashlight. But the fourth hole had a treasure chest. Jake opened the lock with the pin again. Inside, there was a lot of gold. They even found Mrs. Lucas's gold necklace. Then, Jake called the police. Finally, they had solved the mystery. Just then, the robbers came back. Betty and Jack were so involved in the mystery that they didn't notice it was already 8 o'clock. They quickly hid in a closet. 5 minutes later, the police arrived and the doorbell rang. Betty and Jack jumped out of their hiding places and opened the door. The robbers saw them and chased them. When Jake opened the door, the robbers saw the police and looked surprised. Officer Donovan tied the robbers all up and asked the robbers their names and why they stole Mrs. Lucas's gold necklace. "My name is Brad Nickel, and my partner's name is Danny Tall. And here is my story. Susie Lucas, a.k.a. Mrs. Lucas, and I accidentally switched baggage when we were on the same plane last week. I mailed her baggage immediately, and I didn't touch anything inside. She sent my baggage back, too, but she took my gold coins and my Swiss Army knife out of the bag. I called her the next day. She said that she had not touched anything inside my baggage, but I did see a handkerchief inside embroidered with the name Susie. That proves to me that she had lied. That's why Danny and I stole her gold necklace. This story proves that I am an innocent man," said the short robber. "So let me go." Everyone drove to Mrs. Lucas's house to confirm if the story was true. Mrs. Lucas argued at first, but then admitted that she had indeed taken the gold necklace and the Swiss Army knife. Betty and Jack could not believe it at first, but then they had to because Mrs. Lucas returned back the gold necklace and the knife to the robbers. "I'm sorry for what I did. Please forgive me and return my necklace," she said in a sad voice. The next day, they returned the gold necklace to Mrs. Lucas. "It's so good to have solved this mystery, and I'm definitely not hungry for another one," said Betty, and heaved a sigh of relief. Just then, the telephone rang. Jake answered it. As he hung up, Jake added quietly, "Betty, here's another mystery." And so the mysteries continue. The